Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Anxiety Diaries. So, if you haven't watched any of my videos before, I talk about candid, open conversation topics around anxiety, how to navigate stress, and how to overcome it. And in today's video, we are joined by the amazing Alyssa Rose. Hi, Alyssa. Thank
Hi,
you for
thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you here. So, I suppose before we get started with today's topic, which we will be talking about grief and gratitude and how they are connected, would you mind introducing yourself to the class and letting us know who you are, what you do, how you help people, and also why you wanted to come on today's episode?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm calling in from Portland, Oregon, and I am a death doula and grief guide. And I was super interested in your work around gratitude because that's so connected to the work that I do and the way I support people. Um, just because, like, often beneath our grief is just this, like, massive amount of love and appreciation, and there's sadness connected to not having this thing that we love and appreciate, or but like the connection and the practices that we cultivate around gratitude are really relevant and can really nurture us and nourish us through our processes of grief throughout the rest of our lives. So yeah, that grief and gratitude connection I feel really excited about. But basically, I'm supporting people through conscious aging, dying, and grieving. And I come to that through the body. Like, I am a massage therapist with hospice, and I found that it's incredibly important that we address the healing of the physical body through trauma. And for me in my work, that trauma is loss. So that trauma is either a physical death or big transition in life where there's just a big change, and there's a need to honor how things were, how things are now, and how they're now going to be moving forward.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction of yourself, and also hello to your cat.
True.
So, I suppose my first question for you is, how do you feel grief is connected to stress and anxiety and overwhelm?
Yes, it's such a good question. Um, Emotions like sorrow, sadness, fear, like a lot of these kinds of things, we don't always have great resources or coping skills for. And so what can happen is we may dissociate or distract ourselves away from actually experiencing it because it's a hard emotion to feel, or we've been trained that it's a bad emotion to feel. And we don't, in my experience, we haven't really created safe spaces to feel that. And therapy is really helping with that, and coaching is really helping with that. But like, I never witnessed grievers, anybody grieving. Like, I barely witnessed crying. We kind of have this sense of like, I need to do it in private, which
Mm.
is really fascinating because like love and trauma and grief and all these things are relational. And so the healing is also relational. Um, and so, yeah, just really seeing that, like, wow, we're not processing this, and we don't have safe spaces to process this, and we don't have models. Like, parents are showing us, are being strong for us so that we have a solid, like, kind of foundation. But then if we don't see what healthy grieving looks like and how emotion moves through us, it can be really hard to know what to do with these harder feelings. And it can also be easy in our world to distract away from actually feeling them. So it can cause a lot of anxiety, and it can cause a lot of isolation and separation and sense of like, no one understands, and I'm totally alone in this, and what's wrong with
Mm.
me. All of that because there's not a way to like share up around it. But many indigenous cultures they all have kind of ceremony or practices built to support their people through processing loss. And it's like a very normal part of life, and in some cultures, the grieving person is revered. Like, they are doing really deep healing. And also, in many cultures, they believe that it's our work as the people grieving, um, like we are kind of the vehicle in which someone is becoming an ancestor, like a well-seated ancestor. Like their soul is being carried on on a river of our tears. And so by us really feeling that loss and the impact of their life not being not ongoing with us, um, they are able to cross over to be a healthy and become a healthy ancestor. So the role of grief has been a really important part of the process of dying and part of the process of just like of legacy, I guess, one's legacy. And um, so I just feel like it's a big time for us to kind of remember how to integrate those emotions and how to support each other in processing grief. I think that's another like secondary impact, is that if we have a loved one who's grieving, we don't know what to do, and like that
Mm.
causes us anxiety, and we don't want to say the wrong thing, and so sometimes we disappear or we say nothing because we don't want to cause more harm, but we really need people to come forward in that time. And so there's a lot of different pieces where I think we can learn to support each other really well and ourselves.
And I really kind of resonate with what you're saying there about kind of, the need to grieve, but also the kind of absence that's kind of been there, where we've been sort of taught to just get over things so quickly, or just not to connect with how we're really feeling. And not to kind of there's almost this fear of death and this fear of talking about death and about experience it ourselves, but also to kind of be around anyone who's dying. And I noticed that a lot myself, when I've lost a couple of people in my life, and just, myself, actually, the experience, I really had to kind of apply my knowledge that I've learned from Buddhist philosophy to kind of actually counteract the reactions that other people were having about it around me. So I think what you were saying about having the support for one another and supporting people who are also dying, because it can be really terrifying. And I've seen that with people I know who have passed away, where they become so scared of it because it's something that they haven't prepared for,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. And then the other thing that I really related to a lot, what you were saying there, is the kind of being aware of what's going on and knowing when the anxiety or overwhelm is grief, because when we lose someone, we can feel really overwhelmed for years, right? And so that kind of brings me on to my next question, actually, which is, how do you know when you're grieving?
Oh my gosh, it's such a good question. Um, because there's kind of a sense of, well, my grief isn't big enough. There can be a sense of like, my grief isn't big enough, or doesn't look how I think it looks. And to be honest, I think like we're all carrying so much with us that is ungrieved. Like the way we move through life, like there are many deaths in our lives, and that is a beautiful thing about Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist practice, is like the practice around impermanence and seeing kind of this ebb and flow of just like witnessing change and understanding that as a really core truth. And so with both like pain and pleasure and love and loss, like it can be hard for us to really even embrace or want to embrace the knowing that even that which we love so much is going to change. Um, so I would first say I think we all have ungrieved part like things to work with. One, I think after um, the pandemic, like, and the closing of or the shift of many of our lives that took place with the pandemic, I think that there's a greater awareness now of like, oh wow, like massive change. And even if some of that change is good, like even if it gave you more time to now pursue something you love, or like there's still a loss involved. And the ability to be with both and like hold both truths of like there's good and bad, and there's like contrast, there's contrast here. And um So I would say that like there's a lot of small changes that we're all navigating that we don't always take good time to really feel the impact of. We see it in relationships. Like I'm very guilty of that, of instead of wanting to feel the sorrow and sadness of actually saying goodbye, I want to like jump to the next exciting thing, or like to the new job or to the new city. And I really tuned into like, how am I with endings? Like, am I skipping to the next song before the song is over? Or like, am I already moved into the new place and I'm like leaving the place I'm moving out of unvacuumed and uncleaned because I'm just like so excited to get to the new place. So I've been like really paying attention to that, like how are we with endings? But I would say if there's like if there's big emotional responses that come up for you, or like small things that happen that cause a really big emotional reaction, then there's probably like healing to do there, and that healing can look like um, you know look like working with a professional, working with a coach. This is something I support people in, is like kind of going back into like, where does that stem from? Being able to really feel it, like us go there together, feel your physical body to help reassociate us and help us to establish connection to our physical body, so that we're not dissociating, and to neutralize the emotional, to neutralize the emotion of that experience, and then to kind of gain insight and clarity around that experience, and almost rewrite it or just reframe it, so that it has a different path. It's no longer this like default thing that happens to you, but then when you're in the moment where you're feeling this up regulation, this overwhelm, this fear, whatever that emotion is, you have a greater resilience to be with that emotion. And so instead of just going down the default pattern of how you used to be, you get to choose. Like you're still online, your brain is online, and you can choose in that moment moving forward how you want to react or respond.
No, I really, really love what you just said there. And in particular, to be with, right? To be with the emotion. So you're kind of present with it rather than pushing it away, or rather than being consumed by the emotion or the feeling or sensation that you're experiencing, which I know for myself has been such an important differentiation when it comes to grief and when it comes to just overwhelming experiences in general. And I know this is something that we will be talking on in more depth in our workshop later on. We'll talk more about that later on in the podcast. But what I wanted to ask you next, actually, and it's funny because I think my cat is hearing your cat, and now she's like joining the party. Anyway, I just wanted to ask you, actually, could you share a little bit about your own personal experience with grief and how maybe that might have, let's say, prompted you or guided you to become a grief expert?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. I found it through like massive avoidance. Like, um, I definitely didn't grow up experiencing anybody grieving, and I didn't do much like crying myself. I didn't do much feeling. I like really subdued the feeling because I just made a declaration to myself in my early 20s, and I was like, I will not let other people impact my emotional experience, because like I don't trust other people. Like everybody's all emotionally all over the place. Like I'm just not going to be emotionally involved in that way. And so I was very independent and very compartmentalized and very shut off. Like just I made my world smaller so that I wouldn't have to feel these things that felt scary or overwhelming to feel. And when I started, I mean, I came into recognizing that probably through a few avenues, one of which was a much stronger meditation practice, where I really started to see these strategies I've been using to not feel negative, like quote, negative things, but I was realizing it's really like a faucet. Like it's not like I can turn on the good and turn off the bad. It's one pipe and you can allow feeling in or not. And I was not. And that meant like pleasure and joy and happiness too. I was just I was saying no to it all. Um, and like I actually when I went to my first, I support people who use the law here in Oregon, death with dignity law. So if you have a terminal illness, in certain cases, it's legal for somebody to self-administer a medication that will end their life. And the first time I went to a planned death, I was so unprepared and I wasn't unprepared, I just didn't know what to do or say. And so I was really quiet and like in the back, and it was really awkward. And like in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, like I just have to be human. Like no one knows what to do in this case. No one knows what to do here. We've never been in this situation before. And like what we actually need of each other is to just be natural and be human and not be afraid and like really be honest, be instead of this like in denial. And so that way we're not alone. No one's alone. The dying person isn't alone because there's not avoidance. Like we're all, witnessing this. So that was one big key piece for me. So the meditation, I got to start to see the strategies I was using. Going to that planned death where I was like, I felt so helpless. Like I have no idea what to do or say, and feeling that in my own life of supporting people of like, I have no idea what to do or say with you and your grief. I personally missed the death of some really important people in my life. I was in India and my grandfather and stepdad both died in this time that I was gone. And so I missed this huge process of my family, this change. Like I wasn't there for the funerals. I didn't witness any of my family's grief. And then I came back and it was very odd, like a huge disconnect. And I see we do that in many ways. So like it was all this kind of piecing together. And then honestly, I was really opened up to the grief that I was carrying and was completely unaware of through the physical body, and just like actual deep connection and presence in my physical body that was really connected to like just that peak like pleasure and pain place, and just seeing how connected those two things are, and how much grief and sadness there also is with the immensity of love. They're just not separate. And so it's been like very windy, and it's been kind of picking up pieces here and there, and even exploring really subtle ways of longing and missing, like missing the mountain here when I'm on the flatlands of the Midwest, and feeling like we're still connected. Like just because I can't see that mountain doesn't mean that we're not still informing each other or like inspiring each other in the same way as when I'm in Portland and my father's in Michigan. We're not disconnected. We're still influencing and loving each other. Just because we've left sight doesn't mean that love connection is over. So, yeah. Long answer.
Thank you for sharing so openly. I really appreciate your honesty and your openness with talking about this, because I think we should be able to talk about these things more openly, just generally on the internet, and just to kind of break that stigma of the sort of not being able to, almost this kind of hush hush thing of even being open about the grief that we've experienced. And so yeah, just first of all, thanks for sharing that. And I suppose what the other kind of topic that I really wanted to touch on today is gratitude. So, I mean, I know for any of you guys who follow me or have been following me, or any of my clients who are watching this, that I harp on about gratitude. I go on and on and on about it. But essentially what gratitude is, in a nutshell, is it's an appreciation for what has been, what is, and what will then happen. Essentially, that's what gratitude essentially is. And it can be an emotion, it can be a feeling or a sensation or a state of being. So it depends how you personally relate to it. It could be a physical sensation that you experience in your body, or it can be something more cognitive that you experience in your mind. And when it comes to gratitude practice, there are lots of different ways that you can practice gratitude, which I do cover in way more depth in my program, Create Your Space, or in some of my other videos. But today we really wanted to talk about the connection between grief and gratitude, which might seem a little bit interesting in the beginning, a little bit of like, ooh, how is that connected? Because I'm losing something. And do I need to be grateful for losing that thing? Or, this all sounds like a load of crap. What do you want about? So we are going to be kind of really clarifying what exactly we mean by that now. So first of all, Alyssa, what is your take on that question? How do you feel that grief and gratitude are connected and why they should be connected?
Yes, it's such a rich topic. And so I will share a quote that has really impacted me. And this is really my answer. And I'll share more. But so Stephen Jenkinson, who's this beautiful author, he writes a book called Die Wise, and he's been at the bedside of so many people through hospice. He's in Canada. He says, to grieve is to love something that has gone out of sight. To love is to grieve something that has not yet done so. And so it's that same idea of love and grief are the same. Like, in the sense of, if I lose, if there's a death in my life, now the form that my love takes is in the form of grief. My sorrow and sadness and longing and and anger and rage and all of it is love for this thing that I no longer have, again, air quotes, have in a way that I was used to having, and the way that I appreciated and was maybe unconsciously grateful for having. And I think there's some suffering can come when we aren't grateful for what we have now, and we assume that it will always be this way. And so by practicing gratitude, we're saying this means so much to me. It's like this now, and I love this now, and I'm so grateful for receiving these gifts. And in that gratitude practice, there is an awareness of impermanence. There is an awareness of this isn't assumed, and this is really beautiful, and appreciation and presence, so that these things don't go unnoticed. But I really think that that the gratitude practice helps us to really be present to all of these gifts in our lives. And it's really tricky, because sometimes people are in such a state of grief and they don't want to release the grief. They don't want to stop grieving because then they're afraid it means they don't love that person, or they didn't care enough, or, so there's a lot of different ways that it can play out. But I think that they are the same, grief and gratitude and that loss and love, these connections. And they need to really be honored and looked at together as well. I'm curious for you how you see that play out in your own practice, the grief and gratitude piece, because you do so much work with gratitude. I'm curious how grief weaves in for you or your clients.
Yeah, I think it really is a personal thing. And, that's definitely something that we'll be exploring, is actually your own personal kind of journey and how you can connect that with using gratitude for your grief. And we'll be covering that in our workshop together, Alyssa. But I think for me personally, it's really a matter of, at some point when you have to be at a stage to be able to connect to gratitude. So I think it's not something that you can fabricate. So if someone has just died yesterday, you're probably not at that stage yet, right? So there's kind of 2 points where gratitude really comes into grief. I think the first point is when someone is dying, right? When you realize that someone's life is ending, or maybe will end soon, and you connect to that feeling of gratitude, and you can either do that together with the person who's dying, or if that's not possible, you're just by yourself to kind of really have the most love possible to kind of be with and support that person who's dying. Because when someone's dying, it can be really challenging, because they can get really aggressive, or they can start shouting at you for no reason, or there can be things that will happen when this person is coming towards the end of their life that maybe wasn't how they were during their life when they were at their most vibrant. So I think there's that aspect. And then the second thing is, after they pass away, you will kind of go through your own, everyone goes through their own personal journey. I think for me personally, I had to go through the first accepting that they're actually gone, and then coming to terms with that, and kind of coming to terms with all the anger that's there when you realize how unjust it is. This person is not there anymore. And why, and kind of, once you come to terms with that, then connecting to the gratitude. And firstly, the gratitude for everything that you've had with that person, every gift that person has given you. And then also the gratitude for your own life, and the value of the life that you still have. Because sometimes when you lose someone who's really, really important in you, it can feel like, well, what's the point in me being here if this person isn't here? What value? I don't have any value in this world being alive without this person with me, right? So I think, you have to kind of reconnect to your own value without that person, which can be challenging, especially if that person has been in your life for a very long time, right? So, and almost is part of your identity. Then it can be, so kind of really working with that, I think, can help. So that's kind of what helped me personally. But I do really want to reiterate here that it really depends on your personal journey, because losing your parent will be different to losing your spouse, to losing your child, to losing your friend, yes, right? To losing aspects of yourself, which is also, again, a grief. So that's a kind of very an answer to your question.
Thank you for that. And we'll talk more about it in the workshop that we do together, but I loved what you were saying, is there is, acceptance has to happen. And there's a lot of ways that culturally and societally, I feel we are not supporting ourselves and each other through grief, like the ways we think about grief. Even Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who did the 5 stages of grief, she expressed regret for having shared that, because it allowed us to pathologize grief and be like, well, this is normal grief and this is not normal grief, and like, you need to, like, we have these ideas like you need to get through it and go back to normal, and there's no normal, there's no back to normal, like there's just new creation, there's transformation. So like with that acceptance and with just like, what does life look like now? It's not what it was. And so in the workshop that we do, we'll dive more into like, some of the myths around grief and some of the kind of reframes that will support us and our communities as we go through life together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think maybe for today, that's kind of, maybe that's enough for today. I mean, we could literally, me and Alyssa, I think, have had like 3 calls before this call. We just connected through Instagram, and we immediately had this really strong connection, and really kind of resonated with each other. So I think we could talk about this all day, but if you want to know more about gratitude, how it connects to grief, how you can use gratitude practice to help you in your grief personally, we will be running a workshop on August 5th at 8 p.m. British summertime. So that's 12 noon Pacific summertime. I've no idea what it is in Eastern time, so we'll have to translate that for yourself. And it's 3 p.m. Eastern time. And what you'll need to do is just follow the link in the description of this video, or if you're on Instagram, follow the link in my bio to basically get your spot for that workshop. The workshop will have limited spaces. That's just because we want to be able to give everybody a little bit of personal attention to help people to connect with it on a personal level, because the workshop is really geared at how you personally can use gratitude practice to help you with your grief. But also we will have the advantage of having a group together, which will kind of really nice to just connect and really see how you can connect with each other and support each other during this time. So this workshop is perfect whether you have lost someone 50 years ago or more recently, or if you're supporting someone who's passing away or will pass away soon. So it's kind of good for you at any point in time. at your grief as long as you naturally feel drawn to it and feel ready to it. So one thing I just wanted to say here, a little disclaimer, is definitely don't force any of your relatives to come to this workshop. It has to come from them. It has to be something that you personally want to do to actually get value from it. So that's kind of everything for today, but thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for having this conversation with us. And if there's any questions that you might have, feel free to drop a comment in the description on whatever channel you are on, and we will see you on the 5th of August.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, fine. I just forgot to say one thing, which is how can we find you, Alyssa? I forgot to say one thing. Sorry, guys. I've got to say one thing. How do we
No worries. Yeah, so Instagram is a really great way. I'm Alyssa Rose Healing on Instagram, and I'm alyssarosehealingarts.com. That's my website. But yeah, if you follow me, I share a lot of information there, and I look forward to seeing those of you who really feel called to join us on August 5th.
Fabulous. And yeah, how you get me is www.unaenglish.com or at unaenglish on Instagram. So that's it now. Thanks so much. I'll end it now. See you all soon.